Okay, so these videos I'm going to do are a response to a world that essentially wants to function without spirit, a world that wants to function without true knowledge of self. And this is something that we see around us everywhere, in education, in schools. What is the teaching you that you are spirit, having an experience through the body, that you are a soul having an experience in and through a physical body? The whole education system is geared towards making children think that they are a body, a limited entity, and there is nothing broader than that. And anything that tries to tell them that there is something broader than that is condemned, because it's seen to be filling children's heads with nonsense. And yeah, we see like a lot of religions distorting an essential message of truth, but that doesn't mean we can't communicate truth. Just because the religions have essentially sort of eroded away at what is real and covered it up with doctrines and dogma, that doesn't mean that there isn't a valuable heart to all of their messages, which needs to be shared for the sake of humanity to actually survive. I mean, because if we don't know we are spirit, eternal spirit, then we gear our whole lives towards being just these limited body-mind entities that are essentially lacking and need to grab, take, eat, have, in order to feel strong and secure. And this is the model of education that is perpetuated, which means that the destruction of community, of the environment, of all of the things we're apparently seeking to fix is perpetuated, because if we don't see that we are a spiritual essence which is united to all other expressions of spiritual essence, because it's one spiritual essence in me, in you, in the trees, the stars, it's one essence, life. If we don't see that, then we're all just fighting against each other. And this needs to change. This really does need to change. So essentially we need to see who we are, we need to know who we are. We need to learn, yes, through this beautiful mind-body composite, we need to know who we are on a deeper level in order to re-establish meaning in our lives, meaning in education system, but essentially meaning in our lives, meaning that we can understand what we're here for. So each person comes to that for themselves, but there's a few things that I want to share along these lines. So the first one: how can you deny God when God is consciousness and you are that? How can you deny God when God is consciousness and you are that? So God is not a man in the sky. And yeah, I mean, people say, oh, how can God be real? And it's like, well, if you imagine him to be a man in the sky, then yeah, I understand your argument. But if you're saying, how can God be real? How can a man, if you're referring to a man in the sky, then your argument is based on ignorance. Your denial of God is based on an ignorant conception of what God is. So God is universal consciousness. God is pure energy. God is the creative power of the universe, and we are that. We are extensions of that. So I like to imagine God as a ball of light, as a spiritual light, And this is not an uncommon way of representing God or essence or source. I mean, how do you represent what cannot be represented, essentially, because it's beyond form? And beyond the words are another kind of form, thought forms, beyond that, the essence that gives birth to all that. So, all consciousness, like a sun, all consciousness is like a sun, and you can imagine this as the singularity that we are apparently born from. I mean, whether or not you take the idea of the Big Bang to be true, you can derive some sort of spiritual understanding from this. Like, so we came from a singularity before time and space was born. To me, this ball of light is a singularity. It's the oneness of everything and all and nothing, because it's yet to be born. So this singularity, it wants to experience itself. Oneness wants to know itself. So it bursts out into time and space. And this is where we have an experience of being a separate self. This is where we feel separate, because there are many parts and we identify with one aspect, one part. But if you look at it, that singularity burst out into many parts. Each one of those parts has got to be just a simple extension of that one singularity. Just as the sun has many sunbeams, each sunbeam may be separate, but it's all the sun. It's all emanations of the sun. It's all emanations of the one. And this is our spiritual truth. So long as we're only identifying with the body and the mind as a limited identity, so long as that's who we think we are, we're separate, because matter, physicality, is about separation, is about objects, subjects. It's about having an experience through the interaction of all these different parts. I meet you, you meet me, we have an experience, it's like it's something that cannot happen if oneness is to remain oneness. So essentially, in physicality we are separate, which is why we need to see our identity beyond the simple physical and beyond the mind construct, because when we can essentially strip away all the things we think we are, but find out, well, actually that's just a label, that's not an essence, that's not really who I am. When we strip away all that, we can come to our spiritual nature, we can come to our spiritual essence, which is the deeper sense of who we are. And in a lot of spiritual teachings or books or whatever, you might see self referred to in different ways, with a little s, that refers to the body, mind, ego self, the limited sense of separate self, and big S self, which refers to the universal consciousness that we are all. The universal consciousness that we are all a part of, because we are all that. So we are a part of universal consciousness, and we are the whole universal consciousness. And I said in one of my books that we are fragments of the divine light, but the divine light knows no fragments. So it's this negotiation of parts and whole. We can have an experience through the parts, and through that experience we can return to our spiritual truth. We can have an experience of being something other than oneness before we return to oneness. And this is the journey of, this is what it is, it's a cosmic journey of here and now happening, of oneness happening. It's all happening now. And if we remember how this creative energy, we can create whatever we want to create. And this is not something said lightly, this is something that we are all capable of. But so long as we're locked in, I'm just a limited little body-mind identity, then we are throwing our potential away. We are surrendering self to death, because limited parts die away. And if all of our consciousness is attached to a limited part, or identifying with this limited part as our nature, then when the physical body dies, that consciousness kind of trickles away with it. So or would appear to. So why not identify with your greater self, your truer self, the self that is common to all? I mean, unity is seen as a good thing, but if we don't have unity based on something that's really real and felt and directly experienced, then it's just a falsehood that doesn't transcend our limitations at all. So something I wrote I wanted to share is, how can you deny God when you are the gods you are denying? So, I mean, that might sound over the top to some people, but if you consider the fact that all there is one spiritual essence, which we can call God, we can call love, we can call pure love, pure light, pure energy, pure consciousness, pure awareness. If you consider that that's all there is, then how can you be different from that? How can you be different from oneness? It's not like you can have oneness and then you can have something that's not oneness. Oneness is all of it. There is only one. So to say that, to deny God is the biggest arrogance, because it's to say that you can be separate from all that is. And it's funny because that can go both ways. People who think they're separate from all that is can try to become God in themselves, can try to be the all-powerful provider of everything, and try and be this strength, be this power, but it's still within the terms of just a limited little body-mind identity, which is going to fall, is going to fail. And the other side of things is that you can say, oh well, I'm so little, it doesn't matter about me, I'm just a worthless little part. That's another form of arrogance, because again, you're cutting yourself off from all that is, from the energy of God. And the world does not see that it is an expression or a multitude of expressions of one beautiful consciousness, then it cuts itself off from its own beauty. So essentially we've got to know who we are. And this is no new teaching. This is timeless, ageless, spaceless. This is know thyself. Know thyself. It's teaching which is all you need. If you know who you are, then you are capable of anything. So long as you don't know who you are, you succumb to something less. And so in conclusion for this talk, I think it's important to know that you are life. Life is not something that happens to you or something that is outside of you. Life is God, God is life, and you are that. So life is not an external. Life is, you are the custodian of your expression of life. And your expression of life is an extension of all life. And when you know this, you become the microcosm of the macrocosm. You become a single point within the whole that is also the whole itself. And I think it's important when we're talking about God and self, that actually we are the extension of God, of consciousness, of light, of love, and the degree to which we can see our true essence, the degree to which we can erode all that is not us, push the window, the perceptual filters to actually see who we really are. The degree that we can do that is the degree to which we realise our godhood, which is our essential nature. But we are always in service to the whole. We can never be more than the whole, and so this is not like it's not like an egoic statement claiming to be divinity. It is a statement of truth which stands under what is real and understands what is real, understands and stands under what is real. It's not like a limited ego claiming to be gods, because that is madness. Sanity is knowing that you are all pervasive consciousness, God, in experiential form. And through your experience, you can choose to align to your truth. Align to that source energy from which you were born and to which you will return, and which you are in here and now. And the other thing I wanted to mention was, so I said God is not a man in the sky, but how do you represent all that is? How do you relate to that? So for me, I said burning ball of light, like the sun. But for others, they may choose to conceptualize God as a person, because it's easy for them to understand. Doesn't necessarily mean they think God is a person, but maybe they might communicate to God as if he were a person. And so God is essence, but there are many aspects of God, and perhaps it's helpful for people to imagine a person, although it might be difficult for others to understand, in order to have a relationship, a communication. For me, that communication is a direct connection felt through meditation. And this is what meditation is really all about. It's about connecting with your true identity. Okay, so yeah, life is life, you are this. Life is oneness, life is many parts. Life is oneness, life is the expression, and the expression happens through the parts. But life remains life, and if the parts are cut off from their essence, then they lose their life, they become death. We are immortal if we know our true essence, spiritual essence, that we are. If we don't know that, we are mortal. And yeah, the expressions come, appear and fade away, they arise and fall. It's all impressions happening in consciousness, it's all experiences happening in consciousness. But that consciousness lives on, and this is what we are. So you are life, and don't forget that. There's nothing else you need to be who you are. You are it. And the greatest happiness comes from living that truth. How can you deny God when God is consciousness and you are that? It's like the words you say coming from the words you say are the product of the expression of consciousness. And you are this consciousness. So if you're using the words born out of consciousness to deny consciousness, then you're insane. It's like, maybe you don't like the word God, that's fine, don't have to use that word. For me it works. For me it doesn't symbolise a religious idol. For me it symbolises a universal creative energy which is within us and which is us once we align to that energy by seeing our true essence of who we are. So this is what we need to know. To know anything, we need to know who we are. Because once we know who we are, once we know our centre, we can move out into experience, connected to love, to God, to life. If we don't know our centre, then we're just splashing about in the edges, So, I'm always fascinated by this idea that, it's not even an idea, the alchemical symbol of the sun. It's like a dot with a circle around it, or a circle with a dot in the middle. And this is the representation of what I'm talking about. It's like that dot is pure essence, and it bursts apart into experience, which is the sort of the edges of that circle, the material expression, if you like. And from that material expression, once we've gone out from that point to that material expression, we find our limitations. We find where we kind of, after we've gone through the expression, the experience, we get to a point where we start to feel like there must be more to life than this, than these parts, than just this sort of like constant whirring of physicality knocking about in a world. There must be more. And of course there is, and that's the point where we start to come back into our centre, to the centre, which is the consciousness of love, of God, of light that I'm talking about. So yeah, here and now you are life, and you have the chance to learn to see this life through self-inquiry in whatever form it takes. Learning to see the love that you are, here now, one, in many parts, but always one.